I hope you guys are ready to talk about the PPPs with us. We're going to have a conversation, but we hope you'll be able to participate. I don't know if there are mics. Please don't hesitate. It's not about us three here.
Yeah.
There are more than 100 people here. Please jump in if you want to, especially if you seems like dozing. It's important to jump in. The other message I would like to convey is that if you look at the agenda, my boss, Ronke, was supposed to be here. That's why I have the cheat sheet. She had a problem with the agenda, but that's not a problem. It's just a little downgrade that you're getting, right? She's the manager. And the last message, Minister, that I want to convey is that I'm from IFC, not IDB, IFC. The reason I'm saying this is because usually wherever I go in the Caribbean, everybody thinks that I'm from IFC, from IMF or IDB, right? We only have one thing in common, is the I. That's it. So yeah, I'm going to tell you very quickly what we do, and then we can start a conversation. So we do two things, investment and advisory, right? If you're a private investor, if you want to have access to debt or equity, you can call my manager or Sekou right here. They will be able to help you. If you're part of a government, if you want to do PPP, the same way we're doing PPP in Belize here with Minister Koi, you can reach out and I should be able to help you. Enough with IFC, right, Ronke? Enough with IFC. We're here to talk about PPPs with Minister Koi that I met. He probably doesn't remember, but that's not a problem. In 2022,
A while ago.
first time I came here for my first time, it was in 2022, and you were very clear as to what you wanted us to do, which is quite impressive when you do PPPs. Usually when we go in a country, the country wants us to define their objectives, but here, Minister Kohi had very clear objectives. The first one was, I want tariff to go down. That's very clear. The second, well, let's try to meet our NDCs by 2030. And another one, very important, is I want, and listen carefully, that's important. I want local investors to participate in those PPP processes. If we can't do this, it would have been a failure. So it's important, if you're from here, to try and participate in those processes. And speaking of which, I have a question for Minister Koi. Why is it that important for you to have local investors participate in those processes?
Well, thank you, David, and thank you for that introduction. Before I get to that, I want to give a little bit of an introduction as well. Who you have here today and who they represent speaks to what we are trying to accomplish at this investment summit. We need access to capital. If we are to enable investment, enable the private sector, we need to give the private sector the opportunities for access to finance. We have, of course, we have our local banking system. Our local banking system in total, though, is less than $1.5 billion in total loans. Our local banking system at the same time as well has interest rates, average interest rates of near 9%. So the limited availability of capital locally, the high cost of finance locally creates a bit of a problem of access to finance. So we are a small country, we have local investor base, yes, but if we are to go on a path of economic transformation that we are already embarking upon, we need not only public investment, but we need private investment at scale. And so we need to support that private investment at scale. Before you have both IDB and the World Bank Group. In both cases, they don't lend just to the government. IDB is a group, a that has a private sector arm, which is the IDB Invest. Last year alone, they invested or lent over $6 billion in new loans. IFC is less known in Belize because IDB has an office here, and IDB Invest has pushed aggressively their operations. IDB Invest, in fact, has over $100 million in loans to private sector business over the past 5 years. So IDB is already here, already pushing ahead. IFC at the same time, now they're a part of the World Bank Group, and they are certainly more global oriented. IDB is more Latin American, Caribbean oriented. So IDB Invest, as just giving you some data, last year invested by way of loans over $50 billion globally. But in the region, in Latin American, Caribbean region, they invested almost $10 billion just last year alone. Interestingly, while IDB Invest has over 100 million invested in Belize, IFC has none. So just speaking about the size and the opportunity for scale of these institutions, I think it is very important for us to introduce them to the potential investor audience that is before us today. So I wanted to start with that. The expectation or the expected outcomes of this is to inform potential investors in Belize of the opportunities for access to finance. And so when we talk about access to finance, we have to look at creative ways as well, not straight loans, but also what is the topic of this discussion today, and that is PPPs. What are PPPs? Public-private partnerships. And their public-private partnerships represent an opportunity for the private sector to engage effectively in low-risk investments in country that provide public services and that in effect replace the government from having to come up with the capital. So it really starts bringing in the private sector in a meaningful way in a risk transferred structure that is manageable for both the private sector and for the public sector, as the public sector looks to balance and manage prudently its public finances. So I'd lead off with that introduction, but to the question from David, as far as local, maybe you want to repeat that question again?
No, why is it important? Why is it important for you?
I'd have to.
Good. Thank you. Why is it important for you to involve local investors into those PPP processes that will be coming in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yes. First and foremost, PPPs, I'll give examples that you might be familiar with or will be familiar with. One perfect example for Ambergris Key is the airport. We have an airport in Ambergris Key in San Pedro, smack in the middle of San Pedro town, that's at capacity. That's a major bottleneck for the growth of Ambergris Key. So if we are to see continued expansion of the tourism product in Ambergris Key, we need to look at an alternative solution to the existing airport. So IDB Invest, we approached them for a master plan, and I think over the past 6 months, we unveiled that master plan for Ambergris Key, or primarily North Ambergris Key, and that involved the construction of a new airport. Well, that new airport is a public service, but that's not an airport that necessarily needs to be built and owned by the government of Belize. It can generate its own revenues, and it can provide the public service of air transport that we need. But that it can be financed through the private sector support. So in looking at where or a public-private partnership, that's a perfect example of a potential public-private partnership. So in looking at that, we continued discussions with IDB Invest on a feasibility, but it's not a small project. It's for Belize, it's not a small project. It's I think roughly 65 million is the initial figure estimated that it would cost, 65 million US, $130 million Belize. But it's important that we include our local investors in the domestic banking system. For example, we have excess liquidity of roughly $1 billion. We need to mobilize that capital, mobilize that local capital, and get our local investors interested in an investment opportunity. We tend to be risk averse, but these are not necessarily high risk investments. They're manageable investments, manageable risk, and there are opportunities for local investors to become involved and mobilize capital, mobilize that excess local liquidity, but at the same time in partnership with other institutions like the IDB Invest and like the IFC. That it's very useful to have this kind of engagement, so that not only do you become aware of the opportunities, but you actually see a pathway where you can invest, potentially with staple financing, and see a project to implementation, to operation, and to profitability.
Thank you. I have another question. That would be the last. As you know, PPP is a great tool when it comes to, looks like your Prime Minister is calling you.
Sorry, no, it's okay. I'll
Yeah, so PPP are a great tool when governments are in fiscally constrained. So my question to you is, how do you see PPP fit into Belize fiscal and infrastructure development strategy?
Yes, it's important. Our Prime Minister and Eric spoke about our debt to GDP. At a peak of 133% in 2020, now to almost 60%, so certainly more than cut in half. But that said, the government can't afford to get involved in every project that are fundamental or essential to our economic development and economic transformation. We need the private sector. The private sector, as stated before, is the engine of economic growth. Wherever you are, we can't fool ourselves. It's the private sector that leads. And so we want to enable the private sector in that regard. I'm trying to think what the Prime Minister might want, but yeah. So
that was my last question.
Yes. Okay. Well, you asking me questions. I think it's
You
my
can ask,
turn
of
to
course,
ask you questions.
of course.
So, David, from IFC's perspective, which upcoming PPP opportunities in Belize over the next 12 to 18 months are most attractive to private investors?
I'm not going to take too long because time is passing very. I had my cheat sheet, really, plenty of points, but I'm going to go straight to the fact that the IFC is working on a solar project with your teams, and we really want. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So IFC is working on a solar project of up to at least 80 megawatt, and we're working with your teams. We're making good progress. The most important thing that I'm going to say is that it will be important for local investors to participate. Obviously, international investors are obviously welcome. We need their FDIs, but it would be great if local investors could participate. Speaking of which, on September 6th, on Saturday, it will be, I think, Carnival. If you're really interested, you need to come and leave Carnival behind. Just come. We will have a meeting at 2 p.m. at the Atlantic Insurance Building. It will be the second session where we will talk about the upcoming RFQ process we will be launching. RFQ stands for Request for Qualification. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Again, we want to pre-qualify local investors. We want them to participate. Again, international investors are not welcome to that meeting, but are welcome to bid in terms of RFQ. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Well, Dennis, you have been very quiet over here.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for you. First being, how has the IDB supported Belize in strengthening its PPP framework and institutional readiness? And what further steps should be taken to expand beyond the current pipeline?
Yes, Minister. Indeed, since 2019, we have been a close partner of the government of Belize. We had the chance to help to review the PPP policy in the past until its approval in 2021. We are currently elaborating a complementary regulation of this PPP policy in order to make it more operational. And we had the chance also to provide PPP workshops in the past. We are doing the second edition. We have been doing the second edition a few months ago for public functionaries, and in order to learn how a PPP works, what's the cycle of the PPP, and what are the benefits. So this is has been very important steps. We are also helping the governments in developing strategic projects. First, the rehabilitation and maintenance project of the George Price Highway. We are almost starting a feasibility study now. At that point in time, we have been reviewing different modalities of contracting, and like an hybrid PPP model should be a nice way to go ahead and involve the private sector in the project. A very interesting project, a very important project for the government, linking Felicity to La Democracia. And the other project is just what you talked about recently, the Amber Whiskey Airport, the new Amber Whiskey Airport, where we are currently in a pre-feasibility phase and currently studying what could the best procurement process, the best financial structure that would fit with that project in order to go ahead. And looking ahead, justly what we could do and what kind of collaboration to continue to strengthen the PPP framework, definitively in terms of soft law instruments, manuals, guides, in order to elaborate value for money analysis, for example. Also prioritization exercise to understand and build a solid pipeline of projects in Belize. That's important. We have already 2-3 projects, important projects, but with the time, you have to continue to build a strong pipeline to follow and attract private sector most consistently. No? And also, obviously, one very important thing, and that's very important for the private sector, is have a strong counterpart for their contract. So what we would like to do also is to continue to strengthen PPP units and also help the government to create the PPP unit within the ministries that will be the counterpart of those PPP contracts. And finally, based on this prioritization exercise, it could be really interesting to continue to support the governments in new initiatives, in new strategic projects, together with IFC. I understand that they have also that goal right now. So it could be a good fit, I believe.
Yes. From IDB's perspective, what do you think are the main success factors for small economies in structuring viable PPPs while balancing bankability, sustainability, and public value?
Basically, there is several elements that make a small economy successful in proposing PPP projects to the markets, but there are 4, in my opinion, that are really important. First, to be sure that you have strong institution in PPP matters. No? I just talked about creating PPP units within the ministries that understand the contracts, that are able to be a strong counterpart of the private sector and be responding. If there is demand, if there is a problem, you need to collaborate with the private sector to be sure that you will the contract will be sustainable in the long term. Also have a framework regulation that is clear, transparent. When you launch a new process, you launch a competitive process, private sector needs to have clear rules, transparent rules, be sure that they will be playing fairly with other competition and create competition for your projects. So in other words, it's about generating trust. The private sector needs to trust the governments that they will publish interesting projects, that they will be able to be, they are fiscally sustainable, and they are strong projects necessary for the population of Belize. Second of all, the preparation of the projects, and that's where multilateral banks can really help the government in structuring strong projects. I'm talking here about, for example, elements of robustness. When you have demand studies, you have like a revenue generation project, like a port, an airport. The private sector needs to really believe in the studies you have published to be sure that they are reliable and credible. Also, maybe, and that's more related to small economies, you need to be smart when you are sharing and assigning the risks. Specifically, I'm thinking of, obviously, when you propose projects, they have to be like plain vanilla. No? Construction risk does not need to be that hard, that complicated, otherwise it won't generate interest, but also related to the financial structure. You need to be sure that the size of the project is acceptable for the market you are targeting. So you need to understand and be aware that the market need to inject equity in the long term. If they have the long-term vision, like a concessionaire, the banking sector need to inject loans in the projects, and they have some capacity to that. So that's really important to understand that. And also, starting with PPP project, you can propose financial instrument that could help to lower the risk for the private sector. I'm thinking in guarantees, for example. I'm thinking in subsidies of capital through public loans, for example, etc. Now, there are elements that allows you to lower the risk of the project for the private sector, starting with the PPPs.
Right.
And finally, a very important thing also, for smaller economies, PPPs are a very innovative way to do infrastructure. So probably it's really important to get a close contact with the market, private sector, ensuring that they understand the model, and understand the risk, and understand that's a long-term contract with other types of vision, and also for them to strategically adapt to this new paradigm. That's the idea.
Okay.
And Minister, I have also a question for you, very well coordinated. What role do you see multilateral banks like IDB playing in helping Belize mobilize private sector participation in PPP?
I know that the multilateral institutions, IDB Invest, IFC, say we're not looking to compete with the local lenders, local banks. But at the same time, for us, it's important not to call it competition, but the threat of alternative or the existence of alternative sources of financing is important, especially when we have high cost of debt in country. So I know, politically correct or politically sensitive in terms of looking at your involvement in Belize, but I see that as one of the values. One, in terms of impacting on cost of finance in country, helping to bring that down, the cost of finance. But two, to bring scale for large scale investments that we need for our economic development to continue. PPPs in general don't make sense for small projects. You have to have some, I would say, minimum threshold. In fact, in our PPP policy, we have in effect a minimum threshold of roughly 10 million US. That we need a project size beyond that for it to really make sense. We need also a project that's more long term for it to make sense for recovery of your investment and gaining a reasonable rate of return. to get that kind of scale, it's not necessarily available in Belize unless you do, let's say, syndication, which there isn't as much an appetite for syndication in country at this point in time, loan syndications, or utilizing the securities market for in terms of capital markets, which again is somewhat thin in Belize at this point in time. So if we want to jumpstart that development, that economic transformation, it is important to be able to have access to capital, access to finance at scale. And IDB Invest, IFC offers that opportunity for us. In time, we want to be able to attract institutional capital on a capital market basis, but we're not necessarily there yet. And so until we get there, or as we get there, it's important that we have multilaterals like yourselves to play an important role in our economic development by providing that scalable access to finance.